Good evening and welcome to the Hamilton Report. This is our second show, and I'd like to thank all of you who have shared your comments with regard to our first show. It was a lot of fun, and I want to say a very special thank you to Jimmy Lawson, who was our guest last week. If you missed that program looking at the death penalty and the effects that it is having on one innocent man who has been incarcerated now on death row for over 20 years. Please take a look at that program. You can catch all of our episodes at our YouTube page, which is okdemocrats.org/YouTube. I'm really happy that you're with us this evening because we are focusing on a topic that honestly I had hoped that we would have been moved far, far away from by now. Unfortunately, we have not. In fact, there is yet one more interim study being done by the Oklahoma State Legislature regarding conversion therapy or reparative therapy, the so-called therapeutic practice of changing sexual orientation from gay to straight. Our guest this evening is, without question, one of the world's foremost authorities on debunking the whole ex-gay myth. And before we talk to him, though, I want to take a quick look at a piece that his organization, Truth Wins Out, recently produced. It's a great piece, and I think you'll understand in a moment why I'm showing you this before I introduce our guest.
I'm sorry, but we don't serve black people here. See, I belong to a church. Well, I don't just belong to it. It's the center of my life. And the scripture teaches me that it's a sin to serve black people. So as I said before, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'm sorry if I've offended you, but it's my religious right.
The reason I wanted you to see that piece is because it is the same kind of logic that is used there that is so often used when it comes to conversion therapy. Our guest this evening is a gifted writer. He is an author. He's a tremendous op-ed writer as well. You probably have seen him on national or international media. He's someone that I've had the great pleasure to work with over the last dozen years or so. And it's my great pleasure to welcome this evening to the Hamilton Report, the executive director of Truth Wins Out, Wayne Besen. Wayne, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on, and I absolutely love your show. I enjoyed watching the first episode.
I was thinking about it earlier today, and I was a guest on your radio show in Chicago, and I've interviewed you several times, and I always learn something from you, and I appreciate having friends that make me smarter, and you're definitely one of those people. I want to just let our audience know that that Wayne, earlier in his career, was an investigative journalist. And I would like to talk a little bit, Wayne, about how that influenced you in moving into the area of really ripping the curtain away from the ex-gay movement.
I've always been attracted to getting down to the bottom line and the truth. And I've always had a pretty good BS detector. And it drives me crazy when we get alternative facts and these fake narratives, particularly from the extremists that we often have to deal with on the far right. And the only way you can counter them is to debunk their narrative and get to the truth and trap them in a corner and force them to acknowledge that they're lying. And that's what I like to do. And investigative reporting has served me very well in my with my organization, Truth Wins Out, because that's what we have to do. Our opponents on the religious right have traditionally put even millions of dollars into promoting this whole pray away the gay myth, that doesn't exist. They've basically built a castle of nonsense. And it has kind of been my job in a way to go after that and dismantle it piece by piece until it gets washed back into the sea, this castle. And I love doing it. It's just unfortunate and it's sad in this day and age that we are still dealing with the conspiracy theories and the lies and the nonsense and the alternative realities that those who hate, quite frankly, need to push their agenda. They can't do it based on facts. They can't do it based on truth. So they have to create this alternative narrative that they can promote. And I think it's imperative that each and every one of us do what we can to dismantle it and live in the real world, the reality-based community, because without that, we have nothing.
But I appreciate what you're saying, but we are living in a time where people are still pretending that the COVID-19 virus does not exist. And so how do you speak science to people who just don't want to hear it?
Well, here's the truth of the matter is that Mother Nature always wins. And I remember being up north and everybody was wearing masks because we got hit by the crisis first. I'm in Philadelphia and then New York's not too far away. And we took it seriously because we saw the results of COVID. It's a little hard to be a COVID denier when people are lining up outside your hospitals. And then I went down to do a little work in South Carolina and northern Georgia, and nobody was wearing masks. And it was kind of very jarring for me. And many of them had their Trump signs, and they thought, oh, we don't have to deal with this. It's Kellyanne Conway said it wasn't real, and Donald Trump. And I knew right then, I said, oh, no, they are going to get hit by something that they have no idea how serious this is. And lo and behold, it happened. And that's the thing about when you try to deny science and reality. Mother Nature and science and facts always have a way of winning in the end. You can't run away from it. So I just feel bad for people that need to live in this sort of fake reality. And because they're damaging themselves more than anybody, they're the ones who are going to end up on respirators by denying, for example, 19.
When it comes to conversion therapy, though, it's they're hurting themselves, but most certainly they're hurting their children, their grandchildren, their even their friends. Who I'm aware of situations where friends have put people into these conversion camps. Speaking of science, Wayne, how many people have honestly had their sexual orientation changed as a result of any one of these programs?
Zero. And it's very interesting because I've been doing a project all year called the X Team Project. And what we're doing is I'm interviewing in depth all these former ex-gay leaders, meaning they ran these conversion therapy programs. They were the one writing books saying that you could change. They were the ones going on television shows and on the cover of magazines saying you could pray away the gay. They took part in the $1 million 1998 Truth and Love campaign, where the religious right put ads in full-page newspapers like the New York Times and USA Today, and ended up on the cover of Newsweek. And you know what? All those people that participated in that campaign and other campaigns told me and said, you know what? Nobody ever changed. We were not telling the truth. We were brainwashed. We were trying to please people by telling the religious right leaders what they wanted to hear, but nobody changed. In all the years, decades that they did this, the failure rate was 100% and the success rate 0%. And that's what people need to realize. If they go into conversion therapy or try to put their child in conversion therapy, there is no chance it's going to succeed. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It destroys families. It wrecks lives. And in many cases, it pressures people to get married to the opposite sex. And those are the people, the religious right loves to show the wedding photos, but they don't show you the divorce papers that are the inevitable result of most of these marriages. It just creates pain and misery that's so unnecessary. And we have the proof now. When I started out, it was a lot of, they would make a claim and we'd make a claim. There is absolutely no doubt right now. There's mountains of evidence. And that's of all the failed leaders and the people who have been harmed, the survivors of these groups, and every respected medical and mental health organization in the United States, in the world for that matter, says that attempts to change sexual orientation are a disaster. It causes anxiety, depression, self-destructive behavior, and that includes suicide. And we'll never get those people back who killed themselves. And it's just one tragedy after another that we're trying to prevent, and truth wins out.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Germany earlier this year the 5th country to ban so-called conversion therapy?
Yeah, and I think this is something. Well, here's the thing, though. Germany, and there's 20 states in the United States as well that largely are along the red state, blue state lines of the elections that have banned it. But people do have to understand that, first of all, these bans are fantastic and they send the right message and they discourage this practice, and that's great. But they also don't stop adults from participating in conversion therapy, and they also really address only about 5% of the problem, maybe 10% on a certain day, usually about closer to 5%. And the reason is because there's not that many actual conversion therapy therapists left, real therapists that do this, because they're considered quacks in their profession. Most of this, the 95% of this is church-based. So any therapist that gets banned from doing this can find Jesus the next day and open up a pastoral care instead of a psychiatric or a psychologist group, and they can do exactly the same thing. That's why you open the show with the whole point of this whole religious liberty nonsense, the charade of trying to, the religious right, saying, oh, we can do whatever we want to people because of religious liberty. Actually, no, you can't. And we really need to address that by hiding under religion, you're still doing the same damage when it comes to conversion therapy. And we need to call it what it is. It's child abuse. And just because you dress it up under the guise of religion doesn't make it any less harmful. And it gives you no more right to ruin the life of your child. We don't allow, and there's been cases, we don't allow parents to say that their children can't have blood transfusions anymore. They tried to say that was religious liberty. We don't allow that. Why? Because it's child abuse and deadly. Well, so is conversion therapy, and that's the way we need to start talking about it. And there should not be a religious exemption because of this. Just because a child is born into the household of people who hold backward views and a medieval mindset, quite frankly, does not mean that that child should be subjected to torture. And that's what conversion therapy is. Even the UN recognizes it as such.
Well, here in Oklahoma, we still have this process that unfortunately is alive and well. Stephen Black continues his crusade to convert people, and yet the stories that we hear are unchanging in the damage that happens to the individual.
Stephen Black is known as one of the most radical ex-gay conversion pray away the gay ministers in the entire country. Very angry person, and I feel bad for anybody that would enter his ministry. Anybody thinking of entering, every respected medical and mental health organization, as I just mentioned, said stay away. I just finished the project with X-Team. All the people, the bosses of Stephen Black at Exodus International, the group he was part of, sat down with me and said, run away from these groups. They are a fraud. They are a hoax. What they do is they tell people that they can change when they really can't. And there is no chance that it's going to be successful. All it does is put people in the closet and creates a very difficult closet to get out of, because once you start lying about your identity and who you are, it makes it that much more difficult to come out and be who you are. So we need to put these ex-gay groups and conversion therapy into the dustbin of history. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build with this X-Team project and also interviewing survivors. I'm trying to build a historic precedent, because when I was writing my book, I would go, there were other ex-gay leaders from the past who had failed and said this doesn't work. And I went to interview some of the people for my book, and they pretended those leaders didn't exist. And I said, never again. We're not going to allow this historic revisionism. And so that's why I'm interviewing them today. So when the next batch of these leaders say that everybody can change, it's like, you know what? You guys tried this before. It didn't work, and you have no credibility. And we have to, because those who don't own history are doomed to repeat it.
We have one former ex-gay leader that you've interviewed. We have a clip of him. We'll take a look at that now and let him use his own words.
I implore parents, get over your own embarrassment about it. Get over your own distaste that emerges, or disgust that emerges as you think about it. Get over what you fear the neighbors or the church people will think about it. Get ready to fight your church community who's going to tell you that you have to do differently. But let your child be who they are and find a good therapist that will help you, your child, and your family work to a healthy end where you can still love and support each other despite what it is that your adult child's going to be when they grow up. You can't change it. I wish parents would not try. They hurt themselves, they hurt their child, and they hurt their family, sometimes with disastrous, unresolvable consequences.
That's a pretty powerful statement coming from someone who was completely enmeshed in this movement.
Yeah, that's Roy Blankenship. He ran the ex-gay ministry in Woodstock, Georgia, in a megachurch for decades. He's married. They look like he had the perfect heterosexual life. And now he's married to a man. And he said, not only does it not work for him, it didn't work for any of his clients, and it didn't work for any other leaders. So people should start listening to those who went through it. You know, if it's not working for the people who wrote the book saying you can change, it's certainly not going to work for the people reading their books.
This is something that I still hear, though. I hear people say, you know, the whole pray away the gay thing. If you want to change, you can change. And you know this about me. My faith is important to who I am, to the way I live my life. But I find it incredible, the number of so-called church people who are still pushing this kind of thing. Well, I want you to talk a little bit, Wayne, about some of the methods that these quacks use to try to convert a straight person into a gay person into a straight person.
Yeah, well, first, I mean, you know, I want to just address you. There are so many wonderful people of faith who agree with you and me on this. And I mean, I divide this sort of the churches into two types. There's love thy neighbor and there's loathe thy neighbor. And unfortunately, we've got way too many people in the loathe thy neighbor category right now. And those are the ones who don't care very much what happens to those who are put in these pray away the gay camps or these programs. And they use all kinds of weird techniques. That includes bioenergetics, where you take a tennis racket and you go, Mom, Dad, as you hit it. They have touch therapy where they cuddle you and they try to parent you because they say that you're gay because you were bad at sports and your parents didn't love you. And so they're trying to give you the love your parents didn't give, which is obviously preposterous. I mean, many LGBT people play sports and are very good at it. I played college basketball for a year. I'm very close to my parents, and millions of other LGBT people are. Millions of heterosexuals aren't close to their parents. It has nothing to do with their sexual orientation, but that is the lie that they try to sell because they need to have a reason why someone is gay. There was also there exorcisms. I'm sure in Oklahoma you probably have a couple of churches that will enter that arena with the exorcism to get the demon of homosexuality out. You know, in a lot of ways, Scott, that this is just another form of faith healing. I mean, if you're going to believe that you can go and some preacher's going to go healed and hit you on the head and you're going to be cured of cancer, or you're going to take someone who's paralyzed and disabled and suddenly they can walk and all that other stuff. Well, I mean, it's not a big leap to say you can also pray away the gay. This is just another form of faith healing about just as effective. It's the same thing. Some con artist tells you, for money, of course. Well, if you buy their glove, they're going to help you. And they can do this magical cure. Well, you can, I suppose, if you want to believe that again, you can believe that they'll cure you if you're blind as well. It's really not that. It's really kind of the same thing.
Have you, in your work, Wayne, have you talked to former spouses of people who were in this movement, particularly leaders, who then got a divorce and then they were able to live the lives that they always had?
Yeah, you know, one of the saddest parts of this job is when I interview the spouses, those who were married to these so-called ex-gays, and then they end up finding that their husband has a boyfriend on the side and isn't who they say they are, or they find some porn or whatever it may be, and their entire lives are shattered. What they thought was their life isn't their life at all. Other times their husband, or the other way, sometimes the wife, makes excuses why they're not intimate. and they do it for a long time, and it's very devastating. They blame themselves. Look at one of the cruelest parts, I think, for those in these churches that promote this nonsense. And I always found it curious. They just don't seem to really care much about the spouse, and especially when it comes to women. They don't really care if the woman in the relationship isn't satisfied with her intimacy. They don't really care if it creates a family that is miserable. All they want to do, and this is very immoral, profoundly immoral, is check a box. Look, they put a couple together. Look at that heterosexual couple, even though they're miserable and will probably end up in divorce later. And every day they go to sleep at night wanting to die, but they consider that a success story. And I think that's indicative of the mindset of people who still push this this myth. It's very cruel all around. And in terms of for LGBT people, I mean, it's really a form of eliminationism. They basically don't want us to exist, and they don't care how it affects our lives. We do know that this leads to LGBT people killing themselves at higher rates. We know that it leads to substance abuse for young people. It means homelessness, getting thrown out of their houses, breaking up their families. It also encourages hate crimes because it makes LGBT people less than. And our lives, let's help them. Let's help them change by violence. We will encourage them. And these are the kind of side effects that come from this horrific message that's put out there. I think we've come a long way. Fortunately, since I started this organization in 2006, and we have a lot of people finally get it now, and the media certainly understands this better than they used to, but we still have a long way to go. As long as there's prejudice and discrimination out there, as long as LGBT people are made to feel less than, as long as they're kicked out of their homes and their churches are bullied, there is going to be some attraction to trying to change who you are. When people make life difficult for who you are, there are some people that will seek to change, and that's why these groups will endure. The other reason these groups are going to endure is because the religious right that is really behind this, they don't really have another move. They didn't believe in the ex-gay ministries either, the religious right. They thought it was a joke. They laughed at it. They thought these people were fools. They were just, they needed to stop talking about their sin and go back in the closet. So what changed is polling changed. People started to come out of the closet in large numbers, including in conservative churches. And so the fire and brimstone that they had used for so long seemed cruel, and it was backfiring. And so by 1998, they needed to change the way they spoke about this issue. And that's when they said, if we can't just say condemn people to hell and be nasty and call them names, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pretend we're helping them, protect them from themselves. And that will help them change into heterosexuals through prayer and therapy. And of course, now as less people are believing this, they're faced with a dilemma. They're still in the same box. They could either go back to where they were before, being mean and condemning people to hell and calling them names. They can do the ex-gay thing, or there's this third option. It's called love and acceptance. But those are the three options. And they're not ready for love and acceptance. And they know that if calling people names and nasty epithets didn't work in 1998, it's not going to work in 2020 very well. And so they're stuck in this sort of area where they want to tell you can pray away the gay. That's why they're still there, because the other two options, one doesn't work and one they're not ready to accept, the one that would actually help people instead of hurt them.
We have in Oklahoma, we have some churches that the Southern Poverty Law Center recognizes as hate groups. And what's been interesting is I've seen a pivoting away from some of their ex-gay support. Now, that's not lessening their anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts, given the current political climate, Wayne, particularly some of the challenges that have come out of this administration regarding trans people in the military and so forth? What is that doing in terms of moving us forward in really eliminating the whole ex-gay thing, or is it adding some secondary fuel?
Well, I do want to say, I want to give a shout out to the Southern Poverty Law Center. We worked with them on a case, Ferguson versus Jonah, that that shut down the largest ex-gay Jewish group. It started with a video we had where there were two former Orthodox Jewish young people. Their parents sent them to this ex-gay group called Jews Offering New Alternatives to Homosexuality, or Jonah. And they were forcing their clients to get naked and touch themselves while the therapist looked at them in the mirror. It was very creepy. And we did a video about this, and the Southern Poverty Law Center saw it, and they got, to their credit, they went out and they got some plaintiffs, and they sued Jonah, and they shut them down for consumer fraud. And while I think these bans are positive, and I've testified in New Jersey and Massachusetts on two of them, and the legislatures, the most effective thing that's ever happened was the Jonah case with Southern Poverty Law Center. It actually shut Jonah down, and the judge for consumer fraud. We ought to start going after these groups for consumer fraud. That's because they're making promises they can't deliver, and they are lying about their failure rates, and they're luring and recruiting people based upon falsehoods. And so I think we need to get this more lawsuits like the Southern Poverty Law Center. There's been nothing more effective than that. But in terms of the political climate, the political climate right now is very scary. Trans people have been gone after more than gay people, and that's causing an enormous amount of concern. And just yesterday, I confronted somebody who was anti-trans, and there was this guy. I'm just walking my dog, and this guy looked at me and said, "You better watch out." I'm like, "Why?" They said, "There's a man over there in a dress. Did you see him?" I said, "Well, why should I care? Why don't you mind your own business, pal? What's it to you? Is this person harming you?" And the person shut up. But it was just, it was this person who was hurting nobody somebody went after them. And it's this political climate where there's allowing people to be emboldened like that would think that what they were doing to go up to a total stranger and say that about someone just because they're trans, that they could do that. They thought they would be rewarded for that I would look at them and say, "Yeah, thanks for warning me." That's what happens when you have political leaders like this that try to exploit trans people. And we have to be very careful and worry about our trans brothers and sisters because they are so vulnerable, and particularly politically. And when we see the hate crime statistics to back that up. But we're all very vulnerable if Donald Trump wins. Well, he can't. I don't think he's zero chance of winning legitimately. I think he could win by stealing an election, shutting down the post office, and Vladimir Putin helping him. Yes, and he certainly seems to be headed down that route, and that's deeply concerning for me because Donald Trump himself has shown no particular anti-gay. He's not visceral with him, is what I mean. But what he has shown is that he'll do anything for his own political survival. Mm-hmm. And that includes throwing anybody under the bus. And that means LGBT people. And he saw with the trans, with the military, he seems to have more anti-trans. But his mentor was Roy Cohn. But my point here is it doesn't matter. The religious right is using him as a Trojan horse for their judges. They're using him because he stands for nothing other than his ego. If they compliment him and tell him how wonderful he is, they will use him. They will exploit his internal spiritual nothingness. They will fill that vacuum by telling him he's great to enact their agenda, and that's what we have seen. And I'm very concerned when you look at the people surrounding him. You know what? If they get him back in there, the religious right, they're going to want something for it. He's surrounded by William Barr, who I think is more dangerous than Trump. If you want to get scared of someone who very well could be a tyrant, listen to William Barr's Notre Dame speech and what his religious views. That's what's driving him. He's not serving Trump. Trump is serving him. And he's a religious fanatic of the highest order. Watch the Notre Dame speech and you will be stunned who this guy really is, what his motivations are. Mike Pence has an agenda. Alex Azar has an agenda. Betsy DeVos has an agenda. They're all hardcore right-wing ideologues, and they're going to want something. 4 more years of this, and they're going to be a lot more aggressive in turn too. Our community will be on the losing end of this, and we are going to suffer greatly, not just here, but around the world, because as right-wing authoritarian governments around the world gain more power because of the vacuum of U.S. leadership, you're going to see these populist demagogues, and it's never going to turn out well for us. And the reason is very simple, whether it's Russia or here. The only way a populist right-wing demagogue can gain power, stay in power, is to have the church on their side. That's where they get the moral authority. So they essentially buy off the church. They give the church everything what they want, and in turn, the church will endorse them. Well, we see that with Vladimir Putin and the Russian Orthodox Church, for example. But we see it in Hungary right now. We see this same dynamic in Poland right now with our anti-LGBT zones. So our community, at home and abroad, if we get 4 more years of a Trump regime, is in deep, deep, deep trouble. And we're going to see it's going to be free reign across the world for authoritarians come after us, and there's going to be nobody to stop them. This is a very serious time in American history, and we should all be very sober going into the next 3 months. They're going to try and test all of us.
Wayne, that brings us full circle back to where we started this conversation, and that is with the whole notion of religious freedom. And as you so well articulated, we can no longer afford to hurt and, in fact, kill our young people based on religious freedom. My friend, we are just about out of time, but I hope that you'll come back, especially once the Oklahoma legislature gets back in session. I know that it's going to be an interesting time, but I want to remind everyone that they can reach you by just going to truthwinsout.org. Lots of great information there.
Well, and I want to say that everybody should strongly support the Oklahoma Democratic Party and support you. You are as great of an activist as I know, and fighter, and you're gonna get Oklahoma. You're gonna turn that purple, and you're gonna change that. And we need a 50-state strategy. We can't just cede states to the Republican Party. We can't cede them to the right. You know what? The right didn't do that. Who would have thought they would be competitive in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, places like that? But they went after that. And look what they've accomplished. And we as Democrats have got to do the same thing. There is no place in this country that we can overlook. We should be competitive everywhere. And I think people should give you fantastic support because you're doing a great job. And I'm really, I see all the work you're doing. I'm just amazed. And I thank you for doing this on behalf of everyone, because we need that right now everywhere in this country. And Oklahoma is a good place to start.
Well, we need each other. And I want to thank you again for being with us, Wayne. And I'll look forward to talking to you real soon, my friend. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an honor to be on with you.
There's a reason that I chose this topic for tonight. It's one that I take very personally, because I still meet people 10 years, 20 years, 30 years after undergoing so-called conversion therapy, whose lives remain in disaster. They suffer from PTSD and many other mental illnesses as a result of the kind of treatment that they received at the hands of people who cared not about them, but about making a dollar for themselves. I want to say a very special word of thank you to Representative Jason Dunnington and to Sage Malden for his work in keeping this at the forefront of thinking in Oklahoma, battling conversion therapy at every turn. And now, as we see it going back into our legislature this coming session, it's up to all of us to begin the process now of saying we will no longer hurt our children this way. The results, sadly, often end in death for these young people. So we can't do it anymore. Please join me again next Monday evening. Our guests will be our DNC committee members, Governor David Walters, Kaylin Free, and Joshua Harris Till. They will be here talking about what we can expect as the convention unfolds next week and looking at the agenda for the Democratic Party and all that's planned for that week. We will, again, always be here at 7 o'clock, so we'll give you a preview and be in and out well before gavel starts next Wednesday. I very much appreciate the time that you've spent with us this evening. I value that time so much. And I hope that you will continue to let us know the guests and the topics that you would like to see discussed here on the Hamilton Report. And I hope to see you again next week. Until then, take good care of yourselves and have a great night. And we are out. Good job, Bucko.
Hey man, thanks. Great show. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And yeah, I get the link and I'll send it out to my list tomorrow.
Please do, and keep me posted on what's going on, Wayne. You know, we don't make the time to talk as often as we should,